Hi everyone, in the studio with me today I have from JENN Photography, Julie Nixon herself, owner of JENN Photography, and today we're talking about a subject that's very near and dear to your heart. You have a long history of being a photographer, but you do something very special. We're going to talk about today bereavement photography. How did you get into bereavement photography?
Well, I've always been interested as an observer, watching people and how they interact with each other and with animals. From an early age, I used to draw, paint, or write, and so that I could go back later and analyze and make sense of things that I saw that I couldn't quite deal with at the time. When I was 15 is when I actually experienced the power or the therapeutic power of photography myself. I bought my first camera, my first manual camera, $5 a week. I would put down the money and just started to see how the imagery could help and guide me. And I believe through a lifetime of repeated losses and transitions and traumas, that's how I've ended up where I am today, offering bereavement photography services to the community.
So for someone who may not be aware of what bereavement photography is all about, what does that entail?
Bereavement photography entails a compassionate therapeutic service that is there to support anybody going through a seismic life event, whether a person or an animal. It's beneficial, integrating visuals is beneficial at any stage of the process, early on, predicting a loss even, and after a loss has occurred.
How have you found, you've done this for a long period of time,
yes,
and this is obviously very dear to you, and this is your passion, helping people through their loss, whatever that loss may be.
Yes.
How have you found that to help people?
The photography, like up until, let's say, early 20th century, post-mortem photography and bereavement and loss photography was accepted and used by everyone. And then over the years, in mainstream North American culture, it kind of took the back burner because death became a taboo subject and wasn't talked about. And recently, in the last 30 years, is when research has started to indicate the value and the benefits to those suffering from grief and loss. And I think we have some photos. There's a great example of an elderly family who brought a man was in his final moments of life, and he was celebrating with his siblings, and he asked for them to bring my services into his hospital room. They were reluctant, as you know, not everybody has experienced photography in this manner, but we went in. He'd actually had a rough night, and he held on until I got there. We spent 20 minutes, and then within 11 hours he'd passed on. But what we were able to do is have this short session that captured the connection between him and his siblings, and every single one that was reluctant has reached out to me and said they found new ways to use it to benefit their journey.
How do you cope with this and working with the families? It's a very, I would think it'd be very challenging.
Well, I think it's my mindset that kind of sets me apart or makes me capable of such a role. I view it as an honor to be invited into the different stages of people's lives. Bereavement photography isn't all about post-mortem or loss of a life. It's a loss of any sort. So bereavement is defined as the period of mourning after a loss. A lot of times I think people associate bereavement with death. So the way I view it is I use an analogy of the mythical phoenix. There's a phoenix bird who every 100 years, his fiery plumage, he'd return to his nest, and he would be engulfed in flames and reduced to ashes. And then from those ashes, a new fledgling phoenix would be born. And that's kind of how I view everything. It's an honor. It's not a stress for me to work in these environments. I get to actually watch people physically see who they are how they're valued and their connections. So I guess that's just how I I see it differently.
How have you seen, and you're with all of these families, how have you seen that make a difference in the lives of the people who are looking at the photographs afterwards? How does that make a difference in their lives?
Well, with the bereavement photography, there's no one way to use it. There's no right or wrong way to use it. Everybody has a different take on what their needs are, and I just adapt it to the needs, whether based on their beliefs, their values, and what the outcome is for them.
And you, as you mentioned, you have used bereavement photography in all sorts of settings and situations. So you have some amazing photographs of scenery, which I think you were mentioning to me earlier that this is where perhaps ashes were.
Yes. Some people choose to scatter ashes, whether it be of their pet or of a loved one, and they choose to remember that in different and unique ways, and I will go out to the site and photograph for them. But sometimes they want it turned into a piece of art so that it's up on the wall, and it naturally draws attention when people are around, and they can talk about it. It's a therapeutic way for them to talk about it without them springing it on other people. And sometimes we do places or objects of importance or significance that would tie people together.
I would assume that working with families with children or babies must be the most challenging.
Yes, there's no words when something like this happens. The research that's being done now showing the value of integrating visuals into the grieving process is especially vital to the pediatric industry, pediatric palliative care especially, and perinatal death. They're coping with so much, like first-time parents, for example, that
in a
go
short
to the
period of time, right? Everything is right then and there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's how integrating the photography is beneficial, because they are either leaving the hospital empty-handed, and this gives them something to leave with, or they haven't processed the loss yet, because so much has happened in such a short time that the bereavement photography preserves the moments and then allows them to go back and process them when they're ready and cope with the things they never even realized they had to cope with.
So when you are walking into a setting, whether it be in a hospital, in a person's home, how do you skillfully yet tastefully work with everyone?
A lot of assessing and reassessing the situation. I've really learned over the years to read body language. Body language is a huge factor that helps me get through sessions. I watch when people have had enough, or when they're trying to tell you something and ask for something but don't know how. I think it's just experience and the pure passion of wanting to help people through a loss. And you have got that passion and the expertise and such talent.
I want to switch gears for a second, and let's talk about the loss of a pet. You're involved in many associations, associations I didn't even know existed. But when you're passionate about this, you find out about these different associations. Can you explain a little bit about them?
Sure. One of the ones that's affiliated, or one of the ones that supports pet owners, is the Association of Pet Loss and Bereavement. I've been a member of that one because I believe strongly in the bonds that pet owners have with the pets. What I try to do is, if a pet owner receives a palliative diagnosis of a pet, we would arrange for a session that defines the pet. We would show its size, show what makes the pet special to the owner, with or without the owner in the imagery, and then we would do like close-ups of the details and items that pet owners want to have included. It's a way to really celebrate and give back whatever I can, because I've been a long-term pet owner myself and know what it's like. I've been there, and wish, I go back to my images, like that image right there is one of mine. So, yeah.
Can you tell me a story right now that I happened to see some of the imagery that you brought today, and there was a picture, again, I'm kind of going from pets back to humans for a moment, but
Yeah.
and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but there was a story that really popped out at me, and it was a gentleman with no socks on.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And
Yes.
so it's
Yeah.
not necessarily for those that have departed, but
Yes.
also for...
It's a great
It's a
example
really neat
of
story.
those coping with someone who
Yeah.
has left them. That man actually came to my studio, and the funny story about him is when the last studio that I opened, the last location I was at, he was actually my very first client. I didn't even have any furniture in. I had nothing in there. We had one couch, and that's all we needed, and
It's
it
a
worked.
pretty great couch.
Yeah, so he actually experienced over a very short period of time, within 3 months, he had retired, lost his wife from cancer, and downsized from a house to an apartment. So what he wanted to do is he came to me because he had regrets and he needed a way to cope with everything that had happened so quickly. He used to get on his wife's nerves by not wearing socks when he was dressed up. So what we did is we actually created an image with the outfit he was wearing at his wife's funeral without him wearing socks, so that he had that to go back to
What an amazing
and
memory.
see. And then where he had regrets was that he hadn't made the time for a trip across North America that she'd always wanted to do. So I sat with him and we worked on his photography skills and gave him a journal and set him up with a plan to go and document his trip across North America, so that when he came back, he had the material and the content to then create an album to tell his story to his son the way he wanted to.
And this is what I find so special about Julie, because it is so much more. As you said, it's bereavement photography, but also coping. And
Yes.
here you are, you've taken photographs of this gentleman that tells an amazing tale. Like, I'm sure you can just see, and you could probably hear her voice of this no socks. What are you doing? You know, but the fact that then here he is taking this trip across the country, you teaching him photography skills, journal in hand, and now we're on a life mission, and really like that bucket list. So
Yeah,
it seems like it's so much more.
Yeah, I promote a creative coping concept
Yeah.
with bereavement photography.
Now, you've been a photographer for more than 20 years, and I don't say 20 years to show our age or
Yes,
anything,
yes.
because you are so good at what you do and you care about what you do, and you are an accredited photographer.
Yes. I'm accredited with Professional Photographers of Canada, and I'm accredited with Special Kids Photography of America, and actually am the first and still, as far as I know, the only one accredited with that honor. I work with children of all ability levels, mental, physical, you name it. Do a lot of work with Downs and autism as well.
And I love the picture of this little guy here. A loss isn't always necessarily a loss, as you were saying.
Yes. So what we were trying to project with this image is that this little boy has a brother. So this little boy doesn't speak or communicate very strongly, if at all, and his younger brother actually takes care of him. And this image, we were trying to show just the love that his mom has for him, whereas other moms, sometimes it takes time to grieve and see how wonderful the gift is to have a child that's unique.
So overall, what is the most rewarding part to you?
There's so much. I think it's the connection. I think humans crave connection and being around other people and being knowing what their purpose is. And I think that's the most rewarding thing for me, is that I do these sessions and I get to physically watch someone physically see themselves, sometimes for the first time, like see their value and their importance. When I do sessions, especially with parents and children, and when they see for the first time how the children are looking at them when something's going on, because they don't see that in the moment. I think that's the most rewarding, is just watching other people realize their value.
You brought a picture of a young boy in a fireman's outfit.
Yes, yeah.
What's the story behind that photo?
So the story behind that, I brought that to show you because I get asked a lot about how do you, like you had mentioned before, how do you conduct these sessions?
Yes.
So sometimes, depending on the situation, I'm quiet, subtle, in the background, careful with what equipment I use. And then other times, the picture of the man, the two firefighters, is an example of empty nesting. So in those situations, I'm talking and laughing, crying. I'm right in with them, having these raw moments. And this example is an example of a man who had concerns about his son. His son had kind of fallen off the plan or that he thought he should have had for his son. And he realized when his son moved away to Kingston, which is quite far away, 500 kilometers between them, he realized that he did share what he knew and his values, and his son did hear them. He realized that on his own, his son found the fire department, became a firefighter, and when he realized that and the son came home for the holidays, that's when we decided to do a session so that he could actually see that it's faith. You got to have faith in what you do, and I respect that family so much because that father is someone who sincerely walks the talk. Like doesn't just say do as I say. He's living his messages every day, and to work with a father and a son, and to see tears coming from father and son, like that is so rewarding.
Well, and I've had the pleasure of working with you on many occasions, and I can tell you that is so rewarding to work with Julie. And I know you won't say it, you're so humble. You are so amazing at what you do. If people want to get in touch with you, I guess the best way to do that would be to go to her website, jennphotography.ca, and then start the conversation there. They could email you, and then you would obviously start off with a conversation and see what the best.
Absolutely, we would do a consultation and get to know what the needs are and go from there.
Perfect. Thanks for your time today, Julie.
Thank you.
Thanks. JENNphotography.ca, Julie Nixon.